Welcome everyone. My name's Jamie Lowe, Japurong with the Jamara Man from the southwest of Victoria, coming to you from Ngunnawal country today in Canberra. So I'd like to pay my respects to the Ngunnawal people and their ancestors, both past and present. I'd like to also acknowledge all the pieces of land and country that we're zooming in from today, and pay my respects to elders on the call here, and your ancestors, all the ancestors and all the elders that have allowed us to be here today as well, and particularly pay respects to my elders and ancestors that have paved the way for me to be here too. Thanks for joining us and making the time today. Sorry we couldn't get there a few weeks ago, and hope everyone's been able to stay safe through trying times for your mob there with the cyclone coming through. So hopefully you've been able to stay safe through that. And so we're up there. We're going to come up there and see you in person, but because of the tragedy that happened in your community, we weren't able to. And then COVID hit Perth and we had to get out of town. So I flew back to Victoria, and now in Canberra, zooming in to have the Yarn With You mob. Also got Cheryl Kikatucker here as well, joining me. She's going to help out having the conversation today, an important conversation about and getting your views on the Indigenous voice, both from a regional and local level and also a national level, and what it would look like for your community out there in Geraldton. So I've allowed 2 hours for today's conversation, but it doesn't need to go for 2 hours. You can finish earlier if you like, or even if there's a good conversation, long conversation, happy to kind of stay online for a little bit longer if people want to keep on having a yarn. So just some virtual meeting protocols for those who haven't been using it a lot over the last 12 months, particularly through COVID.
No.
So just have while you're not speaking, just have yourself on mute, and then of course when you want to speak, take yourself off mute, which we all kind of tend not to do, and we start talking and we're halfway through our conversation and we haven't got ourselves off mute. So just do your best to remember that. Also, we might just try and have a bit of a break in between times just to give people a bit of a breather, and so you get a bit of a breather from my voice. So today's conversation is, what has been proposed for the Indigenous voice, of course. So give you an idea of where we got to with having this conversation around the local and regional, and also the national voice. So to get your opinions on that, of course, how could the local and regional voices, what would that look like in your community? I think that's really important, probably the kind of bedstone of this whole conversation, to speak about what it would look like in your community. What are important parts of the national voice? We've got a few examples there. It'd be great to get your opinions on that as well. So that's going to be the conversation, or the bulk of the conversation. We've got a couple of videos which will explain the history of how we got to this point, and also what's being proposed in those various kind of different elements or layers of the Indigenous voice. Cheryl, I'm not sure if you can hear me. I'm not sure if you want to do a bit of an intro as well, or if you want me to just kind of kick off and get on with it.
Yep, I just want to say hello to everyone. So Kaya Wanju from Mighty Wajabnunga Abuja. Thank you everyone for being here today. Really sorry we went back up there amongst your mob in your regions. Hopefully we can do our best today, but let us know if we need to explain things, or you want to have a good old chinwag about a lot of this stuff. Previous conversations, it's been definitely a yarn. So I encourage you to please say what you need to say, and because it is being recorded, and so we can be able to provide your thoughts and your feelings on this really important issue. So thanks everyone for being here, and enjoy the conversation. Thank you.
Yeah, some good points. Don't be shy. People haven't been shy previously, so people have got something to say. They tend to say it, so feel free to do that. I know it's tough over the video here, but we'll do our best with it. So we've got a video to kind of kick us off. So just give some some background, just to give you an idea. So there was 32 members of various different design groups that got us to this point, and we met over the course of 2020, 90% over this platform because we couldn't meet face-to-face because of COVID circumstances. And what we did is we started talking about this Indigenous voice, what it should look like, and we got it to a certain point, and we got it to a point to then go and talk to the mob about it. And so over the past couple of months, in all corners of Australia, we've been, not just us, of course, but the whole 52 members have been going out to all various different communities and talking to them about what the voice should look like. So that's happening at the moment. So been a lot in WA. I think there was some sessions up in the Kimberleys a couple of weeks ago. We're down, some in Perth, about a month or so ago. We're out at Kalgoorlie. We're up in Carnarvon. So it's been a lot happening in WA. We're in Tasmania next week. Thursday Island on Friday. So, it's been happening all over the place. So now's your turn to have your say. There's also opportunities to give any written submissions. So if you've got any written submissions, send them through. And there's also a survey you can take, if you want to go through that process as well to give your views as well. So there's various different options. And of course, your voice will be captured today as well, and they'll be fed back to the design group. So there's the two co-chairs were Marcia Langton and Ton Karma, and they've got a message. Of course, they can't make all the regional dialogues, so they've got a recorded message, which we're going to kick off and play you guys just to give you a bit more of a background information to kick it off.
The voices of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples have been a part of this land for over 65,000 years. And yet, in Australia's recent history, our voices haven't always been heard when it comes to the creation of laws, policies and services that impact our lives.
In 2017, the Uluru Statement from the Heart reaffirmed the need for a national Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander representative body. A body that would serve as a voice to Parliament and Government.
A voice to Parliament and Government is important. It provides a way for our representatives to give advice to government on things that matter to us and affect us.
It gives people from our communities a stronger way to have their say.
Over the last year, 3 groups, made up of mostly Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples,
have worked with government to develop proposals on how an Indigenous voice can best work in Australia.
The Indigenous voice would be a way for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians to share our views with the Parliament and the government and to work in partnership.
To have our voices heard on matters that impact us and to make decisions and improve local services and outcomes together.
The proposed Indigenous voice is made of 2 important parts that would work together: the local and regional voice and the national voice.
A local and regional voice would be a community-designed and led governance structure. They would work in partnership with all levels of government, providing advice on the design and delivery of programs, policies and services for the region. Local and regional voices would be guided by a flexible, principles-based framework. This would allow for different structures in different regions. It would respond to the diverse circumstances of our people and build on existing arrangements that work well.
The national voice would be a national advisory body made up of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. We're asking you to consider how membership to the body could work.
The national voice would provide advice to the Parliament and Australian Government on laws, policies and programs.
It would be involved early and throughout the development of processes, ensuring Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander perspectives are considered before decisions are made. It's now up to you. We want to hear your feedback on how the proposals would best work for you and for your community.
An Indigenous voice is a step towards lasting change for our future and for the future of our young people. Make sure to have your say and have your voice heard.
So this just steps out. So the process. So some of you may have been involved in the old ATSIC days. Some of you may have even been commissioners back in the day. So that was dismantled as we know in the mid-2000s, and since then I think our people have been asking for representation on a national level. Something that we've been pushing for now for almost 20 years. And this kind of steps out the various kind of, I guess, substantive iterations of us calling for national representation and a national voice to represent our people and our collective thoughts. So the Social Justice Commission issued a paper on building a national Indigenous representative body. So that was back in 2008. So it's about 13 years ago now. Expert panel came together on constitutional recognition for Indigenous Australians back in 2012, and many of you probably still remember the whole Recognise campaign, which is all about constitutional recognition. I think that started back in around 2010, so that was all over a decade ago now. So we've been having that yarn for quite a while. Joint Select Committee on constitutional recognition. So there's been a number of steps where this kind of constitutional conversation has been taking place. That came together in 2015. They started having talks around the country as well of what constitutional recognition would look like. The Referendum Council then came together, another body that came together that started talking about the same thing. And they went on a bit of a journey across the country, and I think they had 12 dialogues across the country to talk about what constitutional change would look like. That then led to the Uluru Gathering, where representatives from all those states came together and made their way to Uluru. There were some sponsored people that went there, and I think you could have just made your own way. So it was, wasn't invite only. So if you had the resources, you could get there. I didn't go there. So I think there's about 300 of our mob that got together there, and they started talking about what's this constitutional thing look like, and they started speaking about other stuff. They started speaking about agreement making, treaties, voice, and truth telling, and of course, many of us be aware of the Uluru Statement from the Heart, which came out of that 2017 gathering. That's still a thing, and there's many people out there in our community that are saying, we need to implement that as a whole thing with the voice, the agreement making component, and also the truth telling component. That needs to be accepted as whole. But we know that the government of today hasn't accepted that as a whole, but they are pursuing the voice element. And this is what kind of the conversation is today. They are, in this iteration at least, pursuing the constitutional recognition part of it, but they are saying, well, let's explore what a voice looks like for First Nations Australians out there. So the Joint Select Committee was still ongoing, and we came together as part of forming this co-design process on the voice in late 2019. So we've been catching up for probably about 18 months now, and as I said, a lot of those have been over the virtual platform like this one. And we produced a report which went to the Aboriginal Torres Strait Islander or Indigenous Minister, Minister Ken Wyatt. He put that through Parliament. It was accepted through Parliament to give to the mob, and now this is where the conversation is now. After all these dialogues are had, and it's my understanding there's been yarns with I think over 8,000 of our community. I think there's nearly close to about 3,000 written submissions out there, and over 1,000 surveys being filled out. There'll be another report with all that information compiled into it, given to the minister, and then the same process, they'll be circulated through the Parliament, and the recommendation there, and the Parliament will be up to the Parliament whether they accept it or not. So that's the process to date, and also the process to come. And so there'll be other opportunities down the track once that the second report gets finalised to come out and talk to community again in regard to that. So this is the different design groups. There are 2 Indigenous co-design groups and a senior advisory group. So both Cheryl and I were on the national co-design group, and we would kind of feed stuff up to the senior advisory group, which is the group where Marcia and Tom chair. So we would feed information up there. Collectively, there was 52 of us made up all those groups. So this is very much, we're still in kind of stage 1 at the moment, having the conversation and doing the engagement and talking to you, the community, about what they think is the good and the bad and how they think it may work in their community as well. Any questions about the process and how we got to this point so far?
Hello, it's Carol Whitby in Mount Magnet, Western Australia.
Hi, Carol.
Hi, I have been working previously for the federal government and the state government for most of my adult working life in this region, in the Murchison of Western Australia. I'm just pleased to hear that this process is actually happening, and that we, as the Indigenous people of Australia, will now hopefully have a voice now that, after the ATSIC days. So I would just like to thank the people for the work that has been done so far. And hopefully we can continue on this track to keep talking, and maybe one day we will have a treaty in Australia.
That's definitely my end game. Thanks for your words, Carol. It's great to hear that you've been keeping a close eye on it. The experience that you've had. That's my end game. I'm involved in the treaty process in Victoria. I'm selected by my people to sit on the First Peoples Assembly, and hopefully we'll get there in the not too distant future. Even starting to have the conversation with the Commonwealth, and some would say that this is kind of the first step, or one of the first steps to get to that point. Thank you. Any other comments or insights or questions? We've got another video, and so we've got 2 other videos. One explains the kind of national voice, and one explains the local and regional. So what we might do is we might cut to that, the second video, and just to explain the kind of what a local and regional voice may look like, and that may kind of trigger some conversation.
A local and regional voice would be a governance structure at the regional level. It would be designed and led by Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people and communities in each region. This will be guided by the proposed principles-based framework. Each local and regional voice would provide advice to all levels of government. This includes the Australian Government, state or territory governments, and local governments. Advice from a local and regional voice would be on what's important to communities across its region. Local and regional voices could also work in partnership with all levels of government on how to improve local services and deliver on community priorities. This approach is sometimes referred to as shared decision-making. A key role for each local and regional voice would be ongoing engagement with local communities, groups, organisations and other stakeholders across their region. This will ensure its work reflects the views, priorities and aspirations of local people. Local and regional voices would also provide advice to the national voice on national issues. They would not manage government programs or funding, nor replace or undermine existing bodies. No one set structure is proposed for local and regional voices. Different regions could design different local and regional voice governance structures, depending on what works best for them, guided by the framework. Traditional owners living on country, as well as all other Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander residents in a region, would be able to be involved.
An important part of design of local and regional voices would be the number of regions and how their location will be decided. Between 25 and 35 local and regional voice regions across Australia are proposed. Feedback from consultations will help the co-design groups form a final recommendation to the Australian Government on the specific number of regions. This will include the recommendation on how many regions nationally and how many regions this could mean in each state and territory. No specific regions or boundaries have been proposed in the interim report. If the government supports the final proposal, there will be further discussions to help decide the details of regional areas and boundaries. These would be between Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander communities and all levels of government. Under the proposal, existing regional arrangements would be considered as a starting point in these discussions. Cultural groupings would also be a key factor. Population and geography size would also be considered. Regions could be aligned to state and territories' borders, unless there is a strong reason why this would not work.
Local and regional voices would be underpinned by a principles-based framework which would need to be met. This would be a governance structure at the regional level, and the principles-based framework would apply to all regions. This framework would give communities and regions flexibility to design their own structures. It responds to the diversity, history and culture of each region across the country. The framework is also intended to enable communities to build on existing and different arrangements that are working well. This approach would allow arrangements to evolve and adapt over time. The proposed framework includes 9 principles: empowerment, inclusive participation, cultural leadership, community-led design, non-duplication and links to existing bodies, respectful long-term partnerships, transparency and accountability, capability-driven, data and evidence-based decision-making. The principles would also guide the partnership arrangements between voices and governments. The framework aims to give local people and communities a genuine say on matters that are important to them and support true partnership with governments. Formal recognition of local and regional voices would be based on minimum expectations drawn from 3 principles that relate to good governance. These are inclusive participation, cultural leadership, transparency and accountability. Local and regional voices could be recognised by either a joint assessment with governments or via an independent assessment.
Each region's pathway to setting up their local and regional voice would be different. This would depend on what arrangements already exist in the region to bring people together. Some local and regional voices would be adapted from existing arrangements. Some local and regional voices would be designed as new structures. Communities in the region could agree to use existing arrangements as their local and regional voice, some with only a few changes. They may also agree to adapt, enhance, or change their existing arrangements as needed. Communities may also decide to design completely new arrangements. The aspirations, strengths, culture, and history of the communities would guide the design. Communities may agree to set up a transitional group to design these new arrangements. Transitional groups would work together with communities and stakeholders to set up their local and regional voice. All arrangements would need to meet the minimum expectations for local and regional voices.
Okay, so that's a bit of a snapshot of what the local and regional voices would look like. These are some of the principles proposed that we came up with: empowerment, inclusive participation, cultural leadership, community-led design, no duplication or links with existing bodies, respectful long-term partnerships, transparency and accountability, capability-driven, data and evidence-based decision-making. They're the principles that we came up with. Do you have any thoughts on some of the information that was delivered in the video, or even on these principles that we've kind of drafted to have a conversation about?
Can you hear me? It's Wayne McConnell.
I can't. Is it Wayne? I can't quite hear.
I'm very closer to the microphone if I can.
Yeah, thank you.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah, hear you now.
All right, okay. What we'd probably do from the Midwest Murchison region is probably we need to invite maybe yourself or who's working in the state around developing the regional voice. The Midwest has a regional voice already, which is the Midwest Aboriginal Organisations Alliance. That was set up quite a number of years ago. And it just needs to probably have a look at the principles that you talk about and how we can actually adapt that to our Midwest Aboriginal Organisations Alliance. At present, we know that there's a state body which is probably driven by the NGOs and health, but it doesn't capture all the issues. And I think that's one of the ones that I think is recognised nationally. But from a regional perspective, we've been doing this for quite a number of years. I think going back to the 1990s, late 1990s, early 2000s, so we actually set it up. The reason we thought about doing that, because being in the Midwest, in our state, we recognise that a lot of the state and Commonwealth funding went north of us to the Kimberleys, and we felt the need to be able to come together as a number of different Aboriginal organisations. So when we first established, we went up to 16 Aboriginal organisations across the Midwest, Murchison region. And today we're tracking around 12. We're still doing very strong. Our chairperson of what we call MAOA, the Midwest Aboriginal Organisations Alliance, is a chap by the name of Gordon Gray. And Gordon's also on the West Australian Aboriginal Advisory Council that was set up by the state government here. But Gordon is also involved with also the Closing the Gap process as well. So we have a kind of voice into the Premier and Cabinet at this stage through us, and we do lobby a fair bit and recognised by the state when ministers do come to town to follow the process by talking to MAOA and gathering information from MAOA by having 12 organisations in the one setting to be able to talk about the number of issues that they want to address. So, I mean, we're kind of set up and we're saying, let's invite you guys to come along and have a look at, bring your principals along as well, and let's talk about it. You heard from Carol Minnie. Carol's out at Mount Magnet. Part of the things with Mount Magnet and Meekatharra, which is a little bit up the road, they have what they call Aboriginal advisory groups that are set up for their locations in their towns, of Meekatharra and Mount Magnet. And it's just an invite from our group into the Midwest Aboriginal Organisations Alliance that will make it reach to that far corner of the Midwest Murchison region. So, I mean, we're basically there. Come and have a yarn with us, because we've used the Midwest Aboriginal Organisation working with what we used to call a combined university centre of real health to do a lot of research stuff within our region to identify what are our issues in terms of housing and a number of different items. And we've come out with some really great responses. So, what I'm saying, come and have a yarn and sit down with you guys.
That sounds really deadly what your mob's doing there, and I think this is the design process will happen next. So that might not even start this year, might even start next year, and so there'll be a whole construction phase of what the local and regional voice look like. And one of the main principles it'll try and complement what's existing. So what you're talking about there, will try and kind of enhance things that are already going on in community if they've got established structures already, alliances, voices that they feel like are adequate. So it'd be more of a complementary basis from my perspective rather than kind of duplication or setting up something else.
Yeah,
You've
but
already got it.
what I didn't mention is that we are talking about CEOs and chairpersons sitting down and talking at the table.
Yeah, that's good leadership. Yep.
And addressing the issues across our region together.
I probably should have said at the beginning as well. So
I've got beside me Jenny Knighton, and Jenny and I were the founding members of setting up the Midwest Aboriginal Organisations Alliance, and I just wanted Jenny to have a quick say.
Oh, hi. Yeah, what Wayne's talking about was generated by this community, the need for our organisation to stop duplicating and fighting over funds and misrepresentation of issues and all those sorts of things. I mean, our Aboriginal, and I like how your principles, your proposed principles are about empowerment, but accountability and transparency and data-driven is so important, because all our mob government's talking about us, but not to us, and they have all the data. We need that data to be able to make informed decisions about what it is that's happening in our community, and not have to go through all these, pipelines to get to that data. So that's an important element of this proposed principles, regional principles, is that we are respected enough to be given the data that belongs to us so that we can work with it. The concept of that regional voice, it's been around since 2009, and it started off as an informal process. Over the years, we've tried to drive it into a formal process with government, but it wasn't happening. So it's good that this has come along, because it gives us an opportunity to say, have a look at this model. Of course, it's worked for us. We've been able to garner a lot of support from government with different things, like we've now got a hostel, which we fought for years. So it's that voice that's missing since ACSIC, the demise of ACSIC, that is paramount to Aboriginal people. Having said that, when we look at what's happening nationally with the NGOs in terms of health and all that, like Wayne said, that don't really cover representation. So I've been to Canada in 2012 and had a look at a model over there where we've got Mayoa, which we've got now, but you also need to have another tier to this regional representation where you're talking directly to the people, the capacity to bring them together and have a yarn about their issues every couple of months. That's what's missing.
Some people use the term grassroots. Talking to the mob on the ground is critical, I think, and that I think the most critical part of this is kind of the local and then feed it into the regional, because I think you hit the nail on the head when you said that government like talking about us, they don't really like talking to us too much. I think that's pretty accurate. You made some really good points about the data evidence base, and we need to own the data, and they need to give us the data so we can make informed decisions for our own communities' benefit rather than them making decisions for us. So really good points, I think. Well made. I should have said from the outset is that I'm not a government employee either. So in the next kind of phase, I don't know if I'll be around. So I'd love to come out to your country and have a talk about the next phase. I can't guarantee that I will be around. Continuity is important, and rather than seeing different faces all the time, I get that. Deal with my own mob and you see different faces talking about the same thing all the time and get different answers. So I'll try and be around for the next phase, but I'm not an employee with the Commonwealth, so we should have just made that clear that Cheryl and I are here as part of the select committee to have the conversation, but we're not employed by the Commonwealth. So that's a probably critical point as well, Cheryl. I think.
Yeah, definitely don't work for the government. We work for our mob.
That's right. Yep. That's right.
Yeah, I see you sitting there with NIA on the corner there thinking.
Yeah, that's right. And I've got all the signage behind me and all that stuff as well. So yeah, I can understand.
Look, it's great to see that, because the fact is that if you want to come and talk to us, NIA sits at our table as well, when we do those town meetings. So the local representative of the NIAA can probably pass on. I see Ellen's down there, Ellen Extenton there as well. So look, if you want to come through at local level, and we'll be able to talk to you.
Yeah.
Can I just add in here, one of the reasons we're not on your country at the moment is because of the still the damage that the cyclone caused through the Midwest region. But we actually had planned to be up Geraldton and out in the Midwest area. So really sorry about that, but we've got to do the Wodgina way through this IT technology for now. But be really good to definitely come face to face and have a good yarn. Now, having said that, I am going to change my screen in the back now, away from the Indigenous voice and back to my mob. Okay, I'm feeling bad.
Being sabotaged, Cheryl. Yeah. So they're all important kind of all important points. I think that that's right. Where I've also a bit of train of thought. This is a kind of series. Were there any more questions? I guess from the other people online. That's where I was going to in regard to kind of the local and regional.
It's Zane Lauder here. I'm behind the computer with Wayne McDonald and Jenny. I work as a consultant with Bundyara, running my own consultancy business, but I've been around Geraldton my whole life. Just in regards, I'm a youth representative, so just thinking about the voice for the younger people and regional. You know, we're looking at Midwest as a region, but within that there's the Midwest, Murchison and Gascoyne. Will they be set up with their own committees? Because, you know, like we all sit here in Geraldton and meet, but our issues in Geraldton are different to the issues out at Mount Magnet, Meekatharra, Carnarvon. So would it be sort of like each local town will have their local voice and then a member from those? I know it's still the structure, but we need to make sure that we capture the whole region and an aspect of male, female elders, male, female youth and representatives within our community.
I reckon they're really good points, and I think just kind of, you know, in my view, I think that each kind of, so you get your kind of region, which is the Midwest, the Gascoyne, whatever it may be, a collection of those, and then within those you have your kind of local kind of towns. So you have your local meetings, and then you'll have representatives from those local meetings which will go to the regional meetings. And I agree. I think when we get on to the national conversation, we'll speak about gender balance. Those remember the old ATSIC days, it was pretty male dominated. So there'll be gender balance mandatory. I know in Victoria when we had our election process for treaty, we had it mandatory that there would be a gender balance in there. So, and we didn't need to use it. But so we've got 50-50 down there in our representative body down there in Victoria, which I think is critical. In the conversations also, they spoke about groups that are underrepresented. There's still a lot of those cohorts, but they're underrepresented in various different kind of, I guess, forums. And youth was highlighted as one of those. I think it's under 25. Cheryl, you might have the stats on this.
Yeah.
Under 25, 50% of our mob.
Well, hang on. Let's go back to the question. That was a great conversation you just started off, because here's your chance to tell us, so it's scribed, about how the local voice fits into the regional, and what region are we talking about? Because we had this conversation up north just recently about, you know, government tend to centralise everything to a town, and people out in communities and at smaller town sites don't get a voice in. So I think it's really important that you provide your thoughts on how you think that might happen in the Midwest region. And on top of that, being someone who does work a lot with young people, one of the things we really pushed was a youth voice, which we're going to talk about in the next video. But it'd be great to hear about what you think would happen on the ground in your local area and what that would look like in terms of structure and how it would work in terms of the regional voice. That would be really interesting to hear.
Currently, as Wayne was saying earlier, we've got Mayo, which is a Midwest Midwest Aboriginal Organisations Alliance. I'm currently working with NIA as a consultant for an Indigenous Youth Connection to Culture consultation at the moment, where I'm creating an Elders and Youth Committee, a governance committee through that.
Yeah.
We're also going to be holding youth forums to find out how we can connect young people back to culture, and that's a Geraldton town-based project. But we're the main town for the Midwest, but we've got all these other smaller towns that really don't get heard and don't have that support and structure in place already. So Geraldton's, we can hit the ground running, but it's about supporting the smaller towns like Mount Magnet, Carnarvon, Meekatharra, helping them set up that structure, and quarantining, a male and youth spot and on those committees, so that there is always a voice for young people. That they are the next generation and the future leaders, and we need to start immersing them in culture and teaching them, mentoring them into leadership roles. And I think that this, the voice, setting up smaller Mayoa versions in the region, in all the smaller towns, and then them coming to the big Mayoa meeting on a quarterly basis, that could possibly work. And then that way, all the smaller towns, all their Aboriginal organisations are working together. They're not fighting against funding against each other and things like that. So I think that we've got a good structure in place at the moment. It just needs to be duplicated and tailored to the other smaller towns' needs. And I think that could probably work for our region.
That's really great. Yeah, that's really great. So that'll be transcribed as probably like a case to have a look at, like a case study to have a look at and best practice. But thank you very much for sharing that. And we'll give it back to Jamie now to do the next piece. Thank you.
Yeah, and also probably an important point that the points that Wayne also made around the kind of the regional structure that exists there, that's noted as well. If you wanted to go into further detail, if you've got existing kind of, I guess structures documented, send them through, because I know that you've got NIAA kind of regional representation there, but it's good to be able to send them through so they get on the email and on the desk of people in Canberra as well. So I think that's really important that you send the information that you got through. It doesn't need to be, even a long email to say, here's our kind of, submission to the regional voice, because it could just be that. If you've got terms of references, the name of the group, what you do, that kind of stuff. Because, not everyone knows everything. You don't know what you don't know in some cases. So the youth representation models, the regional representation models, get them out there, and, they can add to the dialogue as well.
Yeah, thanks.
Yeah, no problem. I think now we're going to move on to the National Voice video. Yep, and then we can have a bit of a yarn about National Voice.
Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people would choose the members of the National Voice. All states and the Northern Territory would be represented by 2 National Voice members. The ACT would be represented by 1 or 2 members. The Torres Strait Islands would also be represented by 1 or 2 members. There would be instances where the members from the Torres Strait Islands represent the views of all Torres Strait Islanders, including those living on the mainland. This would occur for matters of national significance to Torres Strait Islanders. There are 2 ways members could be chosen. Model 1 is by choosing members from local and regional voices. Model 2 is by choosing members through an election process. Under both models, there would be gender balance among members. Under both models, there is also an option for a state or territory representative body for Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people to select National Voice members if one exists. The National Voice could have up to 20 members. This could include 2 appointed members to fill gaps where needed, but only where the National Voice members and minister agree. For example, appointees could be used to ensure a mix of urban, regional, and remote members. Membership would be open to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. There could be an ethics council to provide advice to the National Voice on governance matters and ongoing integrity. 50% of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are under 25 years of age, and 25% of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people live with a disability. Permanent youth and disability advisory groups would ensure those perspectives are captured by the National Voice.
The proposed National Voice would be an advisory body to both the Australian Parliament and the Australian Government. It could provide advice on national matters it decides are the most important to Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples. These matters would be prioritised by the National Voice. They would be on nationally significant matters of critical importance to the social, spiritual and economic well-being of, or which has a significant or particular impact on, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. The National Voice could be engaged from the early stages of the development of relevant laws and policies. It could provide both formal and informal advice. Parliament and the Government would be required to ask the National Voice for advice on laws and policies which only impact Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. They would be expected to ask the National Voice for advice on laws and policies that have a big impact on Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people. When a law is introduced to Parliament, it would be made clear if the National Voice has been asked for advice, if advice was provided, and what the advice is. The National Voice would add to what exists already. This means it would work with and talk to existing structures, not replace them. The National Voice would also connect with local and regional voices, ensuring it reaches into local communities. This would be a two-way relationship. The National Voice would seek community input through local and regional voices. These elements support the role of the National Voice to have the right and responsibility on behalf of Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander Australians to advise Parliament and the Government on national issues that affect Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people.
So hopefully that adds a bit of, colour to the National Voice proposal as well. There's a couple of elements that we think are kind of non-negotiable on there, but there's plenty still up in the air. One of the non-negotiables we thought is the gender balance proposal. We feel like that shouldn't be up for discussion or debate. We feel like that should be given. But there's a number of other things there which we'd like to hear some feedback on in regard to kind of the numbers of how many people should make up the National Voice. There was some debate around the different states, and of course WA being such a big state, and you compare that to say Victoria, for example, and whether that would be fair and equitable to have the same amount of people, 2 from WA, 2 from Victoria. I'm pretty sure I know what the view is going to be, but I'll ask anyway. Well, what do you think about that?
Being such a big state, I'd say at least 6. You've got the top half of the state with the Pilbara and Kimberley, the middle of the state with Peel, Wheatbelt, Midwest, and then the lower part of the state with the Southwest and the Great Southern.
Goldfields.
And Goldfields. Because it's such a big state, I think we need more than 2. Definitely.
Yeah.
Sorry, everyone. Hi, it's Carol at Mount Magnet.
Hey, Carol.
I am and have been the only Aboriginal member of the Midwest Development Commission Board. Here in WA, we have 9 development commissions across the state. So I think it would be fantastic if maybe through the discussions someone tapped into the regional development commissions. Again, though, I don't want to be, as a current board member, Aboriginal board member, I don't want to be seen to be the person with all the answers for our region. So, and the way I operate, I will go back to Mayowa and I will go back to my reference group here in Mount Magnet and in Meekatharra to find out from them what the issues are and then take that to the table.
Yeah, well, I think that another existing structure in WA is important to highlight as well, and how that would fit in the mix. I think that's really, really important, because I don't know about you, Mob, but I get kind of tired of going to, 7 different meetings talking about the same thing in all those meetings. So it'd be good to have a bit of a kind of something that kind of has a centralised focus. I heard the message before about you've got some existing structures, but they only focus on certain areas. This will be a bit of a catch-all, so it needs to be broadened out. So you talk about all the issues in community which are important to you on a local level, which is critical as well. I heard them pretty loud and clear, and I think there would be a bit of a consensus that 2 is not adequate, and you need more. You had a figure of 6 there, and I think Cheryl was a pretty strong advocate as well. Probably, that's putting it lightly, I think. But I think 6 was a number that was kind of spoken about as something that would probably be representative of the state with the different regions that you have there. Were there any further points to add to that particular point around state representation from a national perspective?
I've got one thing to say. The consultations around the state so far have been definitely the same conversation, what you're telling us now from the Midwest. So isn't that a good thing? We're all thinking the same, Let's just hope our voices are heard in WA, because it's such a large geographical location. And our mob across the state are so diverse, yet still the same. And that really needs to be highlighted. So please speak up and say, because, we'll take it to the crew, to the national group, and make sure that WA gets that representation that people are saying across the state. So thank you for your words today, everyone.
It's Jenny again. Sorry for the Midwest taking over this, but in terms of this Indigenous voice, the national Indigenous voice, if you've got people advising the Parliament or the government on laws and policies and stuff like that, one of the things we noted with the makeup of the current regional model is that they must be resourced effectively with the capacity to actually consult with their people. So you can't say you're going to go to Mount Magnet, or Meekatharra, which is about 500 k's away, and you have to be on the ground talking to the people, and you have to have the capacity to do that. So you've got the voice there, but you also got to have the resources for that voice to work. So if you're going to do true consultation, it must come with those resources at the regional level and at the national level. If you're representing WA, for example, you have to have the capacity to be able to get out and talk to those regional groups. You can't do it over the phone. You've got to sit on their barna and talk to them. So that is a real big factor in all this. You can have the voice and have that giving advice to Parliament and flying over and back and all that, but consideration must be given to one, setting up a sort of secretariat or some sort of thing on the ground that actually supports travel out to your regional communities to get the real voices.
That's another point that's been really strong and consistent across all dialogues across the country, the ones that I've been on at least anyway. So you're right, Cheryl. There's been some consistent, some a little bit different, but there's some real consistent themes kind of popping up.
Definitely that travel, Jenny. I hear you. You know, the days of having a tent and a billy can to go visit your mob are over. If this is going to work, it has to be resourced properly, and we are experts in this. And that expertise and that cultural knowledge and all that wisdom we carry on our backs from our mob, plus the trauma of every day and the strengths at the same time of the youth coming through, must be recognised for this to work properly. Thank you.
Correct.
A little car, you know, to get around, or some sort of transport, because we can't send message sticks anymore.
No, and smoke signals don't work very often these days either. So, you know, we've got to be real here. People are going to be, and people are very isolated, you know, like you guys know more than anyone, like even here in the urban area, we're not isolated by, travelling. We're isolated because people are hidden, you know, and it causes a huge amount of mental health anguish and, you know, and all those things. And it's great for people to go visit someone on country and have a yarn, you know, that's one of the, that's a really good therapy. And then, you know, add our humour in there, which is deadly as anything. And, you know, we're a model made in heaven. You know, we just need that funds to ensure that, that everyone is getting their voice, because everyone wants to be, everyone's valuable. That's the thing. We're not a large community, but we're very diverse, and that is our strength. So we'll keep pushing that. So it's wonderful to talk to you guys and hear this. It's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, correct. So some other, like, geographical spread's a thing, especially for you guys. We travel 500 k's in Victoria. We're out of the state, so that's just the fact. Cheryl's laughing. That's just the way it is. We travel across 3 states. We travel 500 k's down south. So the geographical spread's important, and then, another couple important points would be good to get some views on is the which spoke about the kind of the balance of the national group. So you don't have all urban blackfellas. There needs to be regional. There needs to be remote representation on there as well. So I'm not sure how it would kind of work out to kind of make sure that that's a thing. But do you think that should be one of the principles of selection, that there's a spread? So, you know, not everyone selected, say, in WA, that they all live in Perth, for example. So do you think that's a good principle to have, that there's a spread throughout the state?
I might help you out here, everyone.
Yes, please.
Say this, right? Say this as an example. Say if we get our wish in WA and we're recognised with the best part of the country, right, which we know that anyway. And it is, say it's split into 6 regions, say, I don't know yet. And out of that 6, who the kind of characteristics of those 6 to sit on the national voice? Who would they be? Like, who do you want them to be? You got to give us your sales pitch, everybody. Please don't be scared. Cecilia.
Yes.
You got to say something. Come on, here's your chance. Over to you.
It's Carol speaking. Yeah. But most definitely they would have to be not frightened of speaking up for our people and what we want.
Yeah, but we can help with that too, you know. We can, some of the best speakers are the ones that are the silent people, right? And I know Jamie will say, well, Cheryl's been banging on about this too. I want to represent those quiet voices that aren't the loudest, because the quiet ones are the ones we need to hear the most from. You know, they're usually the ones that really are really, like, they might be working in an organisation or a government, but they're also on the ground at the same time. They got They got a bit of both, you know. I'm not really sure where they fit, but those voices are really important. And Cecilia,
yes,
you look wonderful in that video there. What do you reckon?
Yeah, well, yeah, I agree with what you're saying. Like, it'd be a huge honour to actually play that role with representing community. And like, my role at the moment is I work with the children and I sit on the council with my shire. So I pretty much, I could, you know, I could probably say a lot, but just at the moment, I'm just sort of listening to you guys and like, I work alongside Carol as well, and through our Yamaji reference, we've created a elders group out here as well. And just through my role in the community, I get to work a lot with everybody, and I think our youth are very important. You know, I mean, as I've heard, you know, like as I've said, they're our next generation, and we really need to give them a voice and support them and give them as many opportunities as we can, led by our elders, of course. I mean, all that knowledge is very important before we don't have it anymore. So I'm sort of the person in the middle in the Bundy-Mara country at the moment that, you know, like, I just represent all really, and there's just so many things that we do need out here. But, you know, with mental health especially, and a number of other things. But I'm sure as we go along, you know, like, we can, make a difference. I think this is a huge step. You know, I've never been a part of something like this before, and never had the opportunity to sit with different states and all talk about all of our mob and how we can move forward with them and make a better life for them and give them a voice. So it's a huge honour to just sit and soak it all up and learn, and hopefully we can, you know, give our peoples a voice and make a difference in their futures for our grannies and our great grannies.
That's really important, Cecilia. I think I just want to hone in on that. It is I'm glad you said it was an honourable thing what we're doing here, and at the same time, we do want to give people the opportunity who've never had a chance to speak, who never have had a chance to sit on a regional, local or national voice. I mean, how many more wonderful warriors can we meet out there that's going to, you know, keep us going, you know, because our older fellows, the other thing I've heard across WA was, you know, how is this going to be different? We've been talking about this forever and the cows come home, right? What's going to make this different? And I guess the horizon of it is to have commentary from people like yourself who wear a lot of different hats, but you still see the big picture of it all, you know? And, you know, I don't want people to lose hope and inspiration. I felt like that up north. You know, people, you know, felt like, you know, what's going to be the difference? But I kept saying, you know, the sun will rise every day and so must we, you know, and that this is an opportunity. You've got to get on board with this. You've got to say your piece because we may not get it again, you know. So for those people who are feeling a bit sceptical, please don't. Please trust in this process. Please say what you need to say because we really need to hear what you think. And it's from us that we're going to make sure that it works the best way possible. So thank you for your words there, Cecilia.
That's all right.
Samaria, councillor. Hello. Where are you from, Samaria?
Hello, I'm from Geraldton.
Ah, good place.
Yeah.
I was only there about 4 weeks ago.
Ah, yes. Yeah.
Tell us a bit about yourself and what are you doing and what you think about what we've spoken.
So I'm the community engagement worker at Aboriginal Family Legal Service. I've just started in the role. Yeah, I think what we're talking about is good and it's good for our future as well. And me stepping up in this role as a young person as well in my community, it'll help the younger people as well.
That's awesome. I like your name, by the way. Awesome.
Thank you.
What a cool name. That's wonderful to hear from you. Is anyone else? Anne? Ellison? Okay. Do you want to go to someone else? Shall I pick out names? Nice to hear from. Is it Christy? Hello, Christy. Are you there? Or Russell?
Hi, Cheryl. This is Christy. I'm here. I'm actually an NIAA staff member, so I'm one of the people online that's just taking note of all of the important things people are saying. So I won't contribute.
Well, thank you very much for being there, because this is a dinky die process. So everybody, you hear from Christy. She's writing it all down. So get your words in while you can. I think we're going to go over to Anne. Anne?
Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay.
Over to you.
Okay. I found the comments really interesting. I think some of the things that we are talking about today has been on the agenda for years and years. And I think one of the things that I would like to see is something done. Less talking, let's get some action done. I think there's a lot of overlapping in services. I think a lot of remote areas don't get sufficient services. With a national voice that can take our concerns to Parliament would be fantastic. But we've been down this road and we've discussed this time and time again. And some of the issues are still on the agenda. Example, housing in a lot of remote communities are bloody awful. And that's where I think some of the money should go to building houses for the Indigenous people. And you've heard of the overcrowding, and it's just deplorable. So I think some of those issues have been on the agenda decades. We need to, when we get money, and every time a new government comes in, they talk about, we've got, so many $1 million for Aboriginal housing. Well, let's see those houses get built. Especially in WA, you've seen some of the, I've been to some of the communities, and look, I wouldn't let my dog stay in those homes. The toilet, the systems are not working really well. When we get family over, there's about 20, 30 people in one house. So I think we should really start looking at improving services, and with a national voice at Parliament, we hope that there will be less talking and let's get some money into those communities and start building. I think remote services with medical, I think that's good. Keep it. Don't let it go. And you've heard, a couple of years ago, they were talking about raising or shutting down some of the remote communities. That's disgusting. This is Indigenous people's home community. If you shut those communities down, where are these people going to go? They go back into the township and they create a fringe community, which then still the services are not good enough. But if they stay in their own remote community, in their country, they're most probably likely to continue with those services. And even though it's remote, like the medical team coming in once a week or whatever they do, at least, the people that are filling positions, we have the older people and the younger people having medical attention. So let's keep it and let's push for improved services. That's what I think.
Sounds like you've already put the agenda together for the National Voice to have a conversation with the Australian government and the Parliament. So that's good. That's been recorded. And can I say, with the conversation we had up north, they had a similar words around the communities, particularly remote, and sanitation, water and housing. So spot on there. Like I said, we're all saying the same thing. So
yeah, absolutely.
Does anybody else want to share while we're on this discussion on the National Voice? Okay, I'll give it back to Jamie to go to the next piece.
Sorry, Sharon, if I could just add, please, it's Carol.
Hi, Carol.
Going back to Zane's point earlier, I think if we can please, I don't like the word quarantine, but I'm going to say it, if we can ask to have a couple of, maybe 2 positions quarantined for people aged between 18 and 25.
There's one of the proposals there. There's two proposals. There's a proposal of the Youth Council, which would advise the national group. That's one thing. And there was another thing where there would be 2 seats left vacant. So if there were gaps, youth, for example, that the the national body can then say, oh, we've got no young people here, let's grab some young people. They're the two
yeah.
kind of,
So just going on so you've got the national voice, then you've got these two committees underneath. The youth committee, and there's I don't like this word, but it's disability committee. But with the youth one, and I'm not sure if we're going to the video on this, but everyone that's online today, what constitutes a youth? What is it? Like what age, what description, what characteristics, you know, who would be considered a youth? There's been a little conversation around that age range there. So what do you guys think in the Midwest?
It's Zane here. Youth used to be just 12 to 25, but with the issues with a lot of younger people being a lot sexually active at a lot younger of an age now, I know the government say 12 to 25, but I suggest going down to 10 years of age. On a national voice, though, and a regional committee, I think that it needs to be the 18 to 25 so that they can commit to it and be able to talk, but also mentoring on a local level, mentoring those younger kids. I used to run the Aboriginal Youth Centre here in Geraldton, and we had 3 councils set up in our Indigenous Youth Council. There was the Executive Council, the Senior and the Junior Council. Now, the Executive Council were representatives of the Junior and Senior Council, and they met weekly, and the other ones met, you know, every now and then. But instead of just having older kids, when the older kids were working, you know, in community programs and that, we actually got younger kids to attend in that 10 to 12 years of age, and they were mentored by the older youth. I think, but with this, it definitely needs to be someone who can travel alone. You know, if you're thinking of representatives that are going to be representing our region at a national level, you need some young people that can travel alone. Otherwise, if you go under the 18, it's going to get a bit too tricky. But in saying that, I think that the local voice should be opened up to younger kids, so that on a local level we're engaging with all kids, not just what the government stipulate as youth 12 to 25. We as people in our community know where the issues are and how the age of those kids that are facing those issues. So that's what we need to do, set it on a local level, I think.
Jenny here, just a quick point on backing up what Zane's saying. Why wouldn't you, with the youth council that you currently got in mind, how is that, I mean, why isn't there consideration going towards having that youth council the same as the Indigenous body, where they have 6 reps from WA, you know, like that, so they are a real representative body for youth, have the same criteria for the national Indigenous body, because you've got the master and apprenticeship model there, you've got the old fellas, then you've got the young fellas. They should be sitting around that table too, being able to be mentored into taking over and listening to what's happening at the same time.
I can answer that. Spot on and hooray, because I think exactly the same way, just like the people in Broome and Derby and the Give River communities, and they said exactly the same thing. If we go down the line in WA of 6 regions, and then youth representation from those 6 regions to represent Western Australia, that would be awesome. So you've said exactly what the Mob Up North have said. So depends on what the government are going to say about this. But, you know, we've now Christy described that just a moment ago. So that will go into the notes. And again, it's a common theme from the Mob Up North. So so that's wonderful. I think that's a good point. Thank you for sharing.
Just a quick one, Cheryl. If they're serious about this Indigenous voice, then they need to consider that sort of stuff, because otherwise, like...
hey, I'm right with you, sister. Fighting all the way, you know?
talk about stuff till you're blue in the face.
Yeah.
You get the model right, you'll get the consultation right and the representation.
I think Lisa's got her hand up.
Yes, I would agree. I think it needs a representation of all age groups around the table talking. Yeah. Thanks.
Yeah, there was a conversation also on the other end, like getting our old people in there as well to make sure that, you know, that it doesn't just end up being a bunch of 42-year-olds or something like that, that you need the kind of seniority. Is that your age? And I guess your age then, Cheryl, did I? Or something. But, you know, there needs to be some seniority in there to kind of offer guidance to that committee. I think that's, do you think that's an important element as well?
Yeah, I think you just need to have a good balance of not just the age, not just being elders, but also looking at grassroots people representing grassroots people. People that are grassroots and they work in their community, they're the ones that know what the issues are. And they're the ones that I believe are better equipped to fight for their community and be a voice for their community because they're on the ground working in their community. And I think that it needs to be stipulated somewhere that it's not just a glorified council for people to put notches in their own belt, but to actually go in and represent their community and make some real changes. And I think that something like, I don't know how we could put it, but having something in place so that it's not utilised for people's personal agendas, but it's actually, it needs to be us talking about what we can do for our people and how we can better, you know, provide sustainability for our communities and things like that. And I just think that having a good mix, but also having those young and older people there, but in the middle, we need people that are on the ground in the community and aren't afraid to stand up and talk and fight for what's needed in their communities.
It's good.
I think we're going to be okay in that space because I remember fighting terribly for exactly what you just said about the grassroots mob who know our people inside out and upside down, every which way you look. And they're the ones with the Mudich court, you know, the heart that drives the work that they do and the words that they share, and then will go back and are totally respected by their mob for the work that they do. I tell you, I met one wonderful lady up in Gib River Creek, and she just hit the nail on the head with everything that you said. I mean, she had a lot of pain in her conversation, but by golly, what a wonderful person. And I think those are the voices we really, really need to. I agree with you. I think you know, and I'll keep pushing that. So I'm glad that you brought that up today. Thank you.
There's a couple of points which are related to some of this discussion around composition of the group, and that's one of the questions which is left unanswered. So it'd be great to get some views on this as well. So there's two proposed models of how you get people to the national voice. There's an election model where you kind of, you know, put your hand up to be elected and people vote for you, or they're selected from the regional groups. So they're the two different models which are proposed. What do you think, and just kind of going on some of this is kind of just continuing that conversation, what do you think would be the best model? You electing a person from your regional group, or people just putting their hand up and so there's 25 putting their hand up and, you know, you go in to vote at an electoral office to vote for one of those or two of those or six of those 25.
Or it could be a mix of the two, or completely something different based on what you think today.
Regional council model, where people voted their constituents in, or as you want to put it. I like that voting model. I think these fellows here in our community know who will stand up for them and who will talk for them, who will represent their issues, and most importantly, they trust. and respect. So I think giving the people the voice up there at the national level, you need to give them the option at the local level of finding out who they want to go and advocate for them, you know, that they can do the job for them. That's just me.
You could have a hybrid of the two models. You're right, Cheryl. I know in Victoria, through our election process, there was community kind of selected people, so they went through their own process, and there was whole statewide election processes as well. And we divided the state up into 5 regions. We had, and so there was 4 regional regions, and there was 1 metro region. And so you just went and voted for someone that lives in your region, and then, you know, there was 3 for each of those regions that were voted up, and then you had the kind of reserve seats model as well. So there's pros and cons, there's no doubt, to each of the models, and you could have it so that if it's an election model that they don't all get elected from one region, you could have the spread where you vote for someone from your region, you're not voting for someone from the southwest, for example. I think that's probably it on composition of the group. Another kind of important detail, I think, that we get asked often around whether it's going to be a voice to government or voice to parliament. Well, the advice is that it would be both, a voice to both the government system, but also advice to the political system as well, so your ministers, etc. So it'd be both. So I think there's some people out there it's only a voice to government, etc. But we push pretty hard that it's going to be a voice to parliament. They're the decision makers. It's also important to have an influence over the people that do it. So government, the bureaucrats. So it's good to be able to have oversight and, you know, be able to tell them what to do sometimes as well. But, you know, you definitely got a line to ministerial and the Prime Minister. So that's just wanted to make sure that that point's clear within this as well. I think we're about towards the end, Cheryl. I'm not sure if I've got a whole lot more to kind of say, but I'm just going to kind of go around and see if there's any kind of last words that we need to kind of pick up. But I may be missing some stuff. If you think I've missed some stuff, maybe.
Yeah, can I just say, with the youth council, some of the things that we've brought up, if, you know, to have a space and a place, if people are bringing up traumatic experiences or traumatic things going on in their community, that those young people are looked after. So that's really important. Same with any of our mob, really, but young people who still haven't built that capacity yet. What else did we talk about? I can tell you the grassroots level conversation really came through quite strongly in the things that in the other groups that I've been speaking to. And what was the other? With the disability committee, again, if there are people representing the disability community who you know, have a disability themselves, then the meetings and travel would be sorted in a way so that it wouldn't prohibit them. You know, like people with hearing issues, you'd have a PA system. People who have diabetes and it's affecting renal and they can't see that paperwork is on 16 font. You know, the transportation of wheelchairs and wheelchair access. But the thing that concerns me a little bit, and I'm going to share this with you, is the unseen mental, you know, disability. So, you know, people who are suffering in that space, this group has to be mindful of all those needs and make sure everyone's okay, you know, because it's really difficult to get up and speak in front of people, let alone deal with traumatic experiences yourself and represent people with trauma. So we're making sure that we look after that space. If you've got any words on or any ideas in that area there, that would be helpful. Here's your chance to share that now. Thank you. So Maria, I can hear you thinking.
Putting it on her again. Hey, a couple of points that I wonder, I think we missed maybe is the proposal of an ethics committee, so they can vet some of the people through to the National Voice, which we may think past the what do they call it, the pub test. So that would kind of oversee the people that get elected in, and they'd have a kind of a criteria to see if they reach the standard. That's one thing. So that gives some reassurances, I think, to who actually gets elected onto these national representative bodies. And number two, one thing that I had a close-up view down here in Victoria, because we went through the whole process of electing people on and whatnot, is that you need to turn up and vote or get involved within your regional kind of systems and whatnot, because if you're not there and you're not having your say, you don't get your voice heard. So if you don't turn up and have your voice heard, it's not heard. I reckon that's critical. So those people that have made the time to be online today to make sure that your voice is heard, I think is critical. And stepping through this process, and one of the things is just voting for someone. You use your right to vote who you want to see on there, whether it be that from the regional structure or the state election model. You got to turn up. I know in Victoria that we had only a small turnout of voters, I think, because we lowered the age to vote to 16. So a lot of our young people, the first time they were voting was in an Aboriginal election, which was pretty deadly. But we only had 4,000 of a potential 25,000 people turn up to vote. And then the other 20,000 started complaining about who got voted on. And I'm like, well, you might have turned up to vote, and then you complain about who got voted on. So I'd really encourage, when it gets to those points, those kind of, when it's actually happening, if it happens, if and when, turn up, have your say, make sure your voice is heard. If you want to put your hand up, there's been some deadly voices on here today. Put your hand up, have a go, and it'd be great to see some non-usual faces at a national level talking about their community and what their community needs on a national, and also filtering down to that regional level as well. So I just wanted to make those kind of points before we start wrapping up. And I think Lisa's got another question or comment.
Yeah, thanks. I just wanted to know, when you were talking about people running for positions on the National Voice, I was just wondering how, if you're voting for people, how would you know their motivation and their background, their desire to represent? Would it be something that they'd put in as an expression of interest, or how would that happen?
Well, they'd have to nominate themselves to be elected, and so yes, they would have to. This is just my thoughts. They would have the whole spiel that you can kind of view online.
Yeah.
Through the process that we just elect, in the process of electing the commissioners for our Truth and Justice Commission in Victoria, and all the shortlisted candidates were actually you'll be able to see them online, and they had the whole spiel about why they think they would be good for the job, etc. And yes, then you could feed in comments, not for public view. You'd feed them in the comments to the people behind it, so that your views are heard behind the scenes. It's not for just to kind of bag out people publicly, but you can have your views behind the scenes. So it's a bit of a kind of public kind of vetting process there, even pre kind of selection, if that makes sense. So I would imagine there had to be open and transparent is kind of the principle of it. So people would know who's doing it and what their motivations are behind kind of putting their hand up.
Thank you. That's just out of interest.
Can I just say something? If we go down the line of voting, that means people would have to be enrolled to vote. So think about this, right? If we open that floodgate up, and then we've got young people who have English as a third language going in to vote, and they're set up to vote under the Australian Electoral Commission, because I think that's what they're saying what people are saying, that's the way for us to do this voting. And people do vote on this Aboriginal election and they don't vote subsequent years, they're going to get a fine, right? And so there's a issue there. I mean, it's a good thing for us to vote, but we all know a lot of our mob don't vote. They're not enrolled to vote. So it does complicate things. And I honestly wouldn't want to create a system where we get people to vote for the Aboriginal election and bugger everyone else, and then they don't vote and they get fined and all sorts of things happen. But at the same time, if you vote,
WA, if you get fined, put them in jail in WA, don't you?
Yeah, but even if you vote, then you're up for potentially going on what is it? When you go to court, jury duty and all the rest of that stuff. Possibly. Yeah. So just to keep those things in mind. Sorry, I think Jenny wanted to talk. I think Jenny.
Thinking about the process, like you're just talking about the federal election process, which is very, very, I don't know, it's about access to me in terms of people living in remote areas being able to access the ability or to vote, So everyone in our community's got access to, or most people, got Facebook and places like that where they feel comfortable moving around with. So you've got to look at a process that's familiar with Aboriginal people and not unfamiliar, because if you go down the path of that electoral commission process, who's going to go out to remote communities and do the voting and stuff like that?
Yep.
Would people be required to travel into major towns? There in itself is an issue, so that's why you don't get the uptake. You've got to look at a model or something that's familiar with Aboriginal people already. If you're going to make this work, I don't know.
They're really good points, and so that raises a whole heap of questions of how it's actually going to be representative and how you get people to be able to the table to actually have their say. I reckon that there's some really good points. One of the issues that we had in Victoria is that if you have a blackfella election and people are voting for people, how do you know that the people that are voting are blackfellas? So, so you have to have this kind of whole vetting system for people to actually enrol to vote. So if you get 20,000 people enrolled to vote in WA, how do you know there are 20,000 blackfellas that are enrolled to vote? We couldn't answer the question. We couldn't answer it in Victoria. And so we just had to kind of roll with people's ethical kind of moral compass to say that they were blackfellas. We never got to a point of, I think they had to kind of identify, they had to tick the box. But if you're voting in an Aboriginal election, my view, it needs to be more than just ticking the box of saying you're a blackfella. So that creates some complications as well, just something to kind of give a heads up there. I'm sure there's probably some views on that as well. But I'm just going to the point of the complications of all the different systems because we're trying to build something.
I need a blackfella card.
Yeah. Well,
what I mean, like here at Bundyara.
Sovereignty card, yeah. That's not too bad.
Blackfella card, because that's what it's coming to. We've got to go in Assembly and prove that we're blackfellas. So we issue here at Bundyara, and it's just increased in the last years. It's just amazing that people are coming through our doors saying we need a certificate of Aboriginality.
Yep.
So we're issuing those. People have got those, and they're based on their family connections and that. We know that.
Yep. Yep.
So I don't know, just tick the box thing, but if you had like the old days when they had the Aboriginal Electoral Commission Indigenous unit went out there, they saw their faces when they're voting. So some, like I said before, if they want to do this properly, they've got to put the resources into it and make sure that it works. So having polling booths out there where blackfellas go out there and run them polling booths and make sure it's done properly in remote areas is a good consideration.
Absolutely.
That's where our mob is.
That's right. I haven't got much else to say, I don't think. This has been really deadly dialogue. I've really enjoyed it. Some great insights, some really new stuff as well. I think there's some new stuff that's been brought up in this conversation, at least the ones that I've been involved in anyway. But some of the kind of reiterated points, there's no doubt. I think so it's just probably next steps and when you're going to hear back about, you'll get a report delivered to you guys about this dialogue, so it just doesn't go in the ether, so you'll hear your voices reflected in that. We'll come together again once all these dialogues are finished. All those the national group, the senior advisory group, and the local and regional will come back together in the next month or two. We'll consider everything. We'll try and panel beat it, and then there'll be another report delivered to the minister, and that will play out through the course of the second half of the year, and then you'll hear back hopefully by the end of the year about what's going on. So that's the kind of the next steps of the process, and I know that it can be a bit frustrating because you have these yarns and then, when do you hear back and see what's going on? So hopefully that communication dialogue can continue throughout and keep you updated about, what's happening out there. But I guess from me, thank you for having a yarn. It's been really deadly. Stay safe up there in your country. No more cyclones. Stay well, stay deadly, and we'll hear from you again soon. Cheryl, did you have anything to add?
No. Just want to say thanks everyone for the continued hard work on the ground that you're doing in the Midwest area. I have a lot of family in that area, so I know, what some of the stuff that's going on. And but I was up there not long ago, and I went to some of the schools and chatted to a lot of the kids up there. And I just thought to myself, geez, if the world was in the kids' hands, it'd be a wonderful, crazy world to live in, So that's an awesome thing to say. And so I know it's tough, but onwards and upwards, everyone. Keep going, keep doing what we got to do. Our mob behind us and in front of us are going to thank us one day for this stuff. But I know we do it not for the thanks, but for the goodness of our mob and our families. And, thanks so much for sharing your ideas and your thoughts today. And if you need any more yarns or any, you can get my mobile number or my email off the team, and be happy to have a chinwag whenever. But for now, it's smoke signals from Perth to you guys, and keep going, everyone. Thanks for sharing today. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.